Actually a Mexican theme today, and I didn't because we're talking. So we're talking Cinco de Mayo, and we're talking Mother's Day and the impact on rates, y'all. Welcome to the HPLS podcast. Live, relevant, and high performance information, conversations, and education weekly. Jeff standalone this morning. Jeffrey. And then Lisa's coming in. Now we've got a good 11 seconds different this morning.
Oh, no.
Richard comes in on a quick third. Look at that, Richard. That's awesome. Hey, we've said it, I don't know how many times on the show already. Sometimes the seemingly smaller holidays can throw a serious wrench in the freight markets. Right. Never once would Valentine's Day, prior to looking at data, never once would I think Valentine's Day, Mother's Day, Cinco de Mayo would have an impact on freight rates. And today, I think for all of you that have never explored, no offense to any mother out there, but I'm going to call it the smaller holidays. Like we all focus on the Christmas, the Black Fridays, the Cyber Mondays, and all this kind of stuff.
Right.
Yep.
But the smaller holidays, or festive days, I guess. What would you really call them?
Look at all the mornings. We got to give a shout out to the mornings real quick because there are a lot of mornings. Thank you all. Like, look at all the good mornings.
That. Yeah, Mr. Ridley's here.
I think they came to see the man scientist of logistics data.
Well, that's the big pull on Wednesday, DJ. Nobody wants to see us.
Listen,
Come on. Who the heck wants to see us?
Crystal ball is telling us.
Yeah. They're looking for the Dean Master.
That's right.
9,000. And I actually in today's wording I call him the Grand Master of Data himself. Dean. Dean is working from the cockpit of B-52 bomber. He'll drop some data bombs, so take cover. Look at that. A little styling this morning, y'all. So Dean, talk to us because I think this is really important for every professional logistics rep to really understand what the market does in what would seem to be, it's Mother's Day coming up. So, what are we looking at from a data perspective? Cinco de Mayo as well. Avocados, all the other stuff. And we talked about that because we got, we talked about that Super Bowl as well. The kind of what happens with rates when it comes to avocados and like chicken wings and stuff for Super Bowl. So go on. I'll give you the data floor, my friend.
Yeah, we're in a period where we see strong seasonal effect take over the refrigerated market. Hopefully for carriers in particular, growers maybe not so much because they had a pretty expensive year last year for freight rates, but. So if you think about the seasonality, we start this week, Cinco de Mayo. A lot of that beer has already been, put into markets, especially from the San Antonio brewers of Mexican beer. A lot of that beer has already been staged. But Mother's Day has a huge lift on spot rates this week. We can talk about some of those rates out of Miami shortly. But if you think Mother's Day, Memorial Day, so this Sunday, then we've got Memorial Day, then you've got Independence Day. So there's some strong seasonality that really lifts the market, typically. So that's the big question this year. Will that happen? So this is one of those seasons where spot rates generally increase for both dry van and reefers. The reason is very simple. A lot of that refrigerated freight, reefer carriers are in high demand. So those reefer carriers that would normally haul dry van freight are in the reefer market because the rates will be higher. So that means capacity declines in the dry van space, and dry van spot rates go up also. So what you typically see on a line chart is this fall in spot rates in the first quarter, which we've just seen, albeit 77 cents a mile drop since the start of the year, and no sign of stopping. So that's why it's a little bit scary. We're waiting for it to plateau out. And then what you see is from about April, May through July is an increase of somewhere in the order of 20 to 30 cents a mile on average. So here we are at the start of May. Produce volumes are down substantially. I just pulled some data this morning from the USDA database. Nationally, at the end of April, for the last week of April, we were 63,000 truckloads short compared to last year. Right, so truckload volume
63,000 in a week.
Weekly volumes, yeah. So here's the problem with data when you do year-over-year comps to a year that was absolutely crazy during the second year of the pandemic. So most year-over-year comps now look pretty bad when you compare to 2021. So what I did is I went back and I looked at the data in 2021. If you look at the chart, you'll just see all of the produce volumes are off the chart because we're cooking at home, ordering online at home. The freight mix is different. So what I did is I went through and I just stripped out the month of, the year of 2021 last year and looked at the last 10 years of volume. And what you see is that we're right on par with the average of the last 10 years for the month of April. So even though it's down compared to this crazy 2021, we're actually, trucking along at fairly normal volumes. Now, that said, the season is off to a much slower start. We are hauling fewer truckloads of produce at the start of this year compared to the average of the last 10 years. So it's off to a slower start. Of course, our big state is California. A lot of our volume comes from there. They've got a drought. We've got water shortages we covered on last week's show. So we're certainly off to a slower start in the produce market. But of course, if you dig into deeper lanes, this is where data is really helpful. When you look at some of the lanes this week, you will see spot rates on some of these lanes out of Miami jump substantially, as much as 50 cents a mile this week. Because
and why Miami? What is it that's coming out of Miami right now for everybody watching and listening?
So most of our fresh cut flowers come from equatorial countries where there's 365 days a year sunlight. Labor's a lot cheaper. They fly in on 747 jumbos. It's a south-north freight lane on the air cargo space. So it's South America to the United States. It's North Africa, Kenya to Europe. So they travel in that same time zone. And there is a little bit of crossover. So what we see is, and I've got the data here, again, we've covered it this week, but it's something like 80, is it 80, 80, I'm going to say 88% of our flowers that for Mother's Day will land in Miami. Wow. Miami's got a massive perishable handling infrastructure. They've got a massive infrastructure that can handle air to truck logistics and air to air transfers. So it's a really big hub for international air cargo. So it's well set up. It's typically this time of the year, freight rates are pretty low coming back out of that area because it's more of a backhaul lane, right? Because a lot of that volume goes south into the Miami market because it's a consumer market primarily for reefer carriers, that and Orlando. So rates are pretty handy coming back out for people to get freight moved. But this week capacity tightens, and before I get into the rates, why Miami is the second part of the question from Rose's. 61% come from Colombia and 35% from Ecuador. Oh, wow. So that's where most of our roses and carnations will come this weekend. But if I look at rate view, Miami, Chicago, for example, last year rates jumped 44 cents a mile in this week. Last year, that's average rates. Miami, that's Boston. Miami, Boston, they were 279 in April last year. They're at 274 today. That's excluding fuel. So last year they peaked at 324. There's no reason to suggest that won't happen this week. Miami, Chicago, it's at 266 today. It peaked at 250 last year after jumping 40 cents a mile in the week before Mother's Day last year. So
it's already up.
Yeah, it's already up. So what happens is this time of the year, you start to see this inflationary pressure put on refrigerated rates because some of these big markets come online, big produce markets. But the really big impact on reefer rates this week is typically, the Mother's Day volumes in particular. A lot of teams have to haul it because it's got to get going, get the freight moved quickly. For some carriers, it's a real pain. There's absolutely no love in hauling roses. And that's because a lot of it's hand unload at small shops.
Yes.
Boxes, stems of they're terrible boxes to handle unless you've got there's a forklift. So, and then the other thing that I missed is you've got road check week coming up in 2 weeks. So road check week is when a lot of carriers take time off.
Yep.
Reefer carriers take time off at about double the rate dry van and flatbed carriers do doing road check week, right? Largely because of the 150-mile ag haul exemption, where they can do a lot of work without recording on duty status, picking up boxes at multiple farms within a 150-mile radius. You can do a lot of miles and hours in 150 miles without recording a thing. So anecdotally, my friends that haul reefers, they'd rather have the week off and go vacation than be subject to scrutiny in that area. It's not giving away too many trade secrets, but Mother's Day, Memorial Day. I miss having multiple logbooks. I really do. Gosh. And
I remember when I first got my license, and when I first moved from Quebec to Ontario, and the owner of the company I work for said, you need your license, you need to come on a trip with me. Right. So I went through the whole process, got my license, drove team with him. And like right when we were leaving the office, he grabbed like 4 logbooks, and I'm looking, I'm like, we're gonna go through, and of course, my greenness, I'm like, man, where the hell are we going? Like, you know what I mean? Like I only packed for a week. You know what I mean? And it was I have to, and as bad as it is, because I mean it is not legal, the creativity was off the charts, and I was like, and I'm just watching him go at it, and he's like, oh yeah, okay, so where were we? Okay, we got a ticket here from this toll. And he's like, okay, and I'm like, how, like, this is a full-time job, just thinking of all of this stuff and how it marries up. It was crazy.
So what you do is you got to be pretty good at time and distance and geography, and have you got to think spatially. But more importantly, you got to figure out how big of a lie can I tell if I get asked the question, and what will the lie be? So because you sit behind the windscreen for 12 hours a day, you think all this stuff up. So
you get a lot of time to think. You guys definitely get a lot of time to think behind this.
But so we jest, but paper log fleets are about 30% safer than e-log fleets when you look at serious truck crashes. And ELD data, ELD, because you can pull up and sleep when you're tired and drive when you're awake, and the lines just in the logbook show something else. So remember, as we've said on the show, you can be sound asleep at 75 miles an hour and still be compliant with your hours of service log.
Yes, that's true.
Safety and compliance have got nothing to do with each other. Yet that's the big con, right? Is that if you're compliant, you'll be safe. That's not the case. So, so yes, because that's. But the reality is that road check week will impact capacity. So for those of us in the intermediary space, you've got some major seasonal forces at work, and you've got road check week coming up. Anecdotally, some of the state troopers, particularly in Maine and Vermont, are hammering truck drivers this week. So it wouldn't surprise me to see them do something in advance of road check week just to catch carriers out.
That know they're going to take off for real.
Yeah. So we need to watch that. And I just saw Jeff's comment about the plant nursery business spikes out of southern Florida. Of course, plants are a huge part of the freight task for people that are putting things in their garden, of which I need some for my house we've just bought. So I think the Data Wednesday story is this is one of those unique weeks where refrigerated capacity tightens on some very heavy lanes, and it really starts to lift the market. And that's what we're looking for from a carrier perspective, is a correction of the slide. So the slide is dramatic in terms of how far spot rates have dropped. In refrigerated, they've dropped, and we've focused on reefer this week, down 77 cents a mile year to date, down 23 cents a mile in the last week. Current average is about 239 excluding fuel. And to put that into context, that's 2 cents a mile lower than the peak of 2018. So under
2018, wow,
which was a really good freight year, right? It was a bull market for albeit mostly flatbed. So
Dean, I've got a question for you. So we've got produce being down 50% out of California.
Yep.
We've got the Mother's Day and flowers coming into Florida. Are we to expect a serious hike, or would carriers that typically do the California market shift their freight over to Florida to start hauling that? Because to me, when I listen to the data and I start putting kind of, even just call it the last 3 weeks together, right? Because we've had this conversation before where data is a continuous conversation. It's not a one piece equals ABC. So we have an increase in capacity because we're 50% less produce coming out of, or I think it was 53 or something percent less produce coming out of California that you talked about last week. So will that capacity shift, or is it kind of, or do we expect a drastic increase? And I'm more speaking for people that are hauling general freight out of Florida, that kind of stuff, maybe that has customers that they're competing with other people in the market to go to Florida. Because if people are trying to get to Florida for good rates coming out, they'll drop the rates going down. We've seen that with a few clients over the last couple of weeks in Texas. A few clients have had, a few customers of mine have had clients pulled right out from underneath them because they weren't paying attention to what's happening in Texas. So when there's a spot market piece inside a company, the company's like, well, this person's $400 cheaper this week, we're going to go with them, kind of thing.
Right. The answer is, I think that the regionally carriers are very specialized. Like, they stick to those lanes. Like, if you're running out of Fresno with a team, you're not going to deviate too much from that because you've got a weekly cycle. And with a team out of Fresno, you're into New York and back to Fresno within 6 days. Right. With a team. Right. So I think it's, and again, I'm talking generally about how the market works. There are some exceptions to that. Some carriers will run Fresno to Miami and back. But mostly carriers are running west to east, and they're dedicated to that lane. It's the same for produce carriers. If you follow them on social media, it's Central Florida Produce Boys, it's Left Lane Express, it's Produce Mafia. When you look at these guys and where they run dedicated lanes out of Wisconsin with cheese and butter straight into Miami. They'll run produce straight back. You'll see a lot of Miami produce runs into Canada, so you'll see a lot of those dedicated carriers coming south into Miami. My experience is that if you're hauling produce out of Florida into Hunts Point, New York, you're pretty much running backwards and forwards on I-95 all the time. Because of the cyclical nature and where you've got to be each week for those loads. So I don't think the capacity will shift that much, Dan. I think it'll stay on its lanes and have to weather the storm with those rates. I'm just trying to load up the difference in the markets right now to see what Fresno's average rates were doing. But you'll see, I think capacity rates are going to increase. You will see some carriers gravitate to Miami. The thing is with Southern Florida, right, you've got to be able to get there with decent volumes to load back out. So it's a lane balance question more so than anything. You can't just run empty, down into Florida and then hope you're going to get a load of produce, because that would completely defeat the purpose.
Yes, 100%.
Yeah.
And
now, Dean, real quick, Dean, with the adjustments, because obviously you said we should see with the seasonal jump like 40, 50 cent jump up. Do you think that will, once the seasonality of that lane, do you think it'll come back down, or is it going to stay?
Oh, those lanes will. So produce season in Florida peaks in May and then dies right off as it gets really hot. So you'll still have volumes coming out like watermelons now and other commodities, but it really peaks around now and falls right away. So and then it moves north into Georgia peaches, onions Georgia, and then eventually at the end of the year we'll end up in cherries out of the Imperial Valley, I think it is. Up around Stockton, Lodi, California is like the cherry capital. It's only a 6-week season. And then it moves further north up into Washington State. And so it's sort of this south to north phenomenon. My fear, though, Dan, is if I'm thinking about it from a carrier perspective, the reason I say fear is they've just had a record high diesel price hit this week, right? For those that not in the getting the full compensation for the fuel surcharge, which I think is up to 68 cents a mile this week, or maybe it's 62 cents a mile. But anyway, when you've got $5.51 per gallon average diesel price, it's going to have a big drag on those carriers' profitability and whether they decide to operate in those markets or not. I'm just looking at refrigerated rates here now, and if I could just so spot rates are up generally across the board in Miami. They're up 9.4%. So they're up 20 cents a mile in the last month out of Miami. Average rate northbound to all markets. Out of Fresno, rates have increased. So this is the produce market over there. They were flat last week. So normally you'd be seeing spot rates increase. The last 4 weeks they were 230, 226, 233, 233. So relatively flat. out of Fresno, which is a really big produce market. It's the biggest. And at the time of the year when we should be seeing rates much higher for carriers,
is that because there's an overcapacity because there's less produce coming out?
Correct. There's overcapacity and less volume. Yeah.
And we're actually seeing this. And I was having a conversation with I forget who. Conversation with somebody this week about it, and it's not just California. I don't know if you read the latest report from Indonesia. So Indonesia is about 67% of the world's palm oil, which is made like candy bars, potato chips, like all different foods are made with palm oil. And Indonesia supplies globally close to 70% of palm oil. And they've actually, because of a drought, they've ran out of cooking oil for themselves, and they're unable to import it because one of the places they imported it from was Russia. And so what they're doing is they're no longer shipping palm oil to anyone in the world until their country is set. And we're starting to see a lot more of this globally in the supply chain, where people are saying, okay, we're just going to make sure we have enough for us, and then we'll sell or we'll export what's left. And it's interesting because the article in the Wall Street Journal said, we're not sure, like no reason to ring major alarm bells just yet. But if you look at it like what's happened with coffee, so I don't know if, like, I'm huge on when I go to the grocery store and I see prices increase, I come home and for like an hour I research why it's happened. Right. Brazil and Colombia, the two largest exporters of coffee globally, have had droughts as well. And so those droughts have made coffee go up 63% in cost. And this article from Forbes was saying that the reason you're not seeing, so this article was written like kind of mid 2021. And they're saying the reason you're not seeing it yet is because like the Nestle's, the Starbucks, they have so much supply. But as that supply wears down, you're going to see a massive increase. So it might actually come to the point where you got to, reverse mortgage your home to get a Starbucks cappuccino. And that might be a real thing going forward.
You might have started the new meme going around. There was, hey, I just got approved for my new loan for a tank of gas. Maybe we'll start it with the coffee.
Brother, so you guys know I just got my truck, right? A couple of weeks ago, I just got, finally, after a year and a half, Ford delivered on my truck. So I had to fill it up yesterday for the first time. And let me tell you about a sphincter tightening and me going, no, I'm not doing, forget it. I'm never driving again. Like it was $227 to fill that truck.
Right.
Personal friggin' vehicle. And I work from my home office. And I literally like, and don't get me wrong, I'm not that type of person that will go out and complain. I chose to purchase a truck. Right. I made that decision. I have to live with the consequences of it. But I went from a Fusion Energy, which was a plug-in hybrid. I was 2.3 liters per 100 kilometers. I was getting like 1,000 kilometers to like $42. Now I'm like the complete opposite. But a friend of, we were out for dinner on the weekend, and I was talking to my friend. He's just built a new house, and he's finding the same thing. It's like all of a sudden it's like shortages on specific things that weren't short last year are now short this year. And it's just this scales keep like we're almost in this massive ocean of uncertainty, and the scales keep tipping left and right. And it, on the weekend I went and got a can of coffee. And we usually get probably like one can a month. And so last month we usually get Folgers or Maxwell House are kind of the two coffees, and they're $6 to $8 a can. And I just paid $14.99 for the same can that was like $7 last month.
Right. Like, well, that's the thing. So this is a big question about freight demand, right? Will high inflation and rising costs put a dampener on, consumer demand? So we're all. So this is a really interesting question, because for those of it that are in the intermediary space, right? So spot rates are loosening, capacity's loosening, contract rates are peaking and starting to drop, right? So I think what shippers are going to do that you're working with, they're going to start to extend their bids, do more of them, do more short-term bids. So you're going to see some renegotiation going on, and carriers are going to start coming back saying, yeah, we'll if you can lock in that volume on those lanes, we'll do it for a lower rate. That's already happening because spot leads contract. Right, so if spot is down 77 cents a mile and is under contract about 40 cents a mile in reefer, you've got to expect at some point contract rates get dragged down in the second half of this year. So what the big unknown is, inflation's high, consumer demand could take a hit. We're definitely in a season where we're spending more on services and less on goods. So because the pandemic was highlighted by more spending on goods that trucks hauled. That, as example, by my produce season analogy, we're down substantially, down 31% year over year, but that's comparing to a crazy year last year. So there's more normality returning to the market. But I think from a capacity purchasing point of view, you're going to see costs, rates come down substantially, I think, in the spot market. They will bottom out shortly and start to rise, but I don't think, DJ, you asked, will they rise materially through Independence Day like they normally do? I don't think so. I think they're going to bottom out, and some of those seasonal effects around Road Check Week, Memorial Day, Independence Day, rates will kind of bounce around for the rest of the year is what it feels like. Okay. So that's what we're looking for. But as of today, rates are still heading south in the spot market. And I saw, I think Jeff made a comment and Daman made a comment there about rising diesel prices. Yeah. So $5.51 a mile for diesel prices is just absolutely frightening. So if you're getting all-in rates from your broker and you're not getting full compensation for the fuel surcharge, just average line haul rates, you've gone from making 55 cents a mile this time last year to losing 17 cents a mile today. And that is because spot rates are 17 cents a mile lower year over year, but diesel is up $2.30 a gallon in the last year, I think it is. So carrier profitability, this is where you have good partners and work with your people and be transparent, because carriers are really hurting. It cost me $1,740 to fill up my Peterbilt last week.
$1,740 to fill your and how many miles would you get out of a tank?
Oh my goodness!
So I'm getting that's 300 gallons. I got really big extended tanks for those truck heads out there that are saying, how do you get 300 gallons in two tanks? Divide 6, I only get 6. So if I do 300, it's 1,500 miles. 1,800 miles, sorry.
1,800 miles. So you're pretty much $1 a mile. Fuel.
Yeah, almost exactly.
The average is about 85. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So if you're averaging $85 a mile is what you're spending in fuel.
Yep.
Or 85 cents a mile is what you're spending in fuel. If you're running, $1.80 a mile, that's $1 to go towards truck payments, trailer payments, maintenance, driver wages, benefits, salaries, systems, electrical, gas, heat, gas for your office, heat. So
it's $2.05 is the cost per mile to run my truck. $2.05, right? So $2.05 is like, you have to say, what's the floor price? Where do rates drop to? How low do they go? And you would have to think that, the floor price is what it costs to operate a truck. Well, if that was the case, you would never have anyone go bankrupt, right? The reality is that there are carriers hauling dry van freight out of Miami for 85 cents a mile today.
Yeah.
Because there's not much of it. So that's just fuel money. It's like it's not even.
There's free loads basically.
This is complain about $805 to fill out my 2 tanks per truck.
Right.
Used to. And,
here's
my conspiracy.
He wants it back now. I think that's what he's saying.
Yeah, I'm about to vent. Here's the conspiracy theory side of me coming out. Right? I feel, and again, I feel they raise prices to a certain level where we're all like, oh my gosh, what happened? And then they drop it, but we're like, oh my God, fuel's cheap. And it's so much higher than it needs to be. But it's like, they I can remember when, so I said to my wife yesterday when I filled my truck, I said, never, ever in the 30 years I've been driving, because I got my license at 16. So in the 29 years I've been driving, never have I paid that much to put fuel in a vehicle. ever.
Yep.
Ever.
Yep.
And I've had trucks many, many, many years. And, I remember when fuel went to $1 a liter in Canada. And then it went to $1.10 a liter. And then it went back down to $1. And we're like, oh, man, fuel's cheap today. It's $1. Yeah. Well, a year ago, it was 62 cents. You know what I mean? But they get you. I don't want to get into it because we're not.
Well, these are extraordinary times. These are extraordinary times. And people say, oh, there'll be a bloodbath, blah, blah, blah. Well, what people are forgetting is that carriers just had their best year since deregulation financially last year. Now, anecdotally, I talk to carriers and they say they're pretty flush with funds and they can ride this out. They can park their trucks and take it easy. But I think the challenge is we don't know how long diesel prices are going to stay high because there is a tightening of supply. And part of the reason diesel prices went up this week is a tightening of supply on the East Coast in particular.
Yeah.
So there is definitely inventory issues going on. Supply is tight, global geopolitical risk. There's tons going on. You've really got to stay in contact with the news cycle because it's changing every day for everybody in the market. Nerf's got a good comment. It just distracted me. He's got a guy hauling 82 cents. He's happy to get out of there to buy stuff. He's still shopping at Starbucks though.
He's still only getting a quarter cup of Starbucks though. That's the thing. Mocha.
Frappuccino espresso.
Their fat is hilarious because I don't know how many times if your coffee has more than 2 words, you got to move on, man. And Nerf says
tell everybody
Starbucks
what
mocha latte, frappuccino espresso, Nespresso iced with lemon cherries, banana on top with an umbrella. And that alone is going to cost you $17.99 US.
Yeah, how much does that cost?
You could run out of hours just waiting for it. Right, that's a half-hour break right there.
Creating a line, just saying the order.
Yeah. So awesome, DJ. What do we got to bring us out today, brother? I know. So all of y'all watching and listening before we went live, DJ was struggling to pick a quote, and he's on this streak. And I think what it is, Dean,
today, I wasn't sure. I had, I knew we were going to talk about Mother's Day, Cinco de Mayo, so I had a feeling, but we'll see. But again, thank you everybody for all of your comments, for joining us daily like you do, for all the good mornings, all the feedback. Dean, as always, thank you for the triple D.
Thank you.
That everybody looks for this in the middle of the week. Look, if you want to get your data points right, you want to get your stuff and your information to your customer, this is the day of the week. You need to make sure you're not missing the show. We do have it replayed twice a day for all you on the West Coast who aren't early birds like some of our faithful warriors out there. It's replayed at 12 o'clock and 3 o'clock daily, LinkedIn, so check it out. Again, American Logistics, Centurion Trucking, thank you guys for everything and for making this possible. Damon, shout out to you.
Thank you, Daman.
People,
and to all your comments. You guys are probably the best audience on any show I've ever seen. It's awesome. You guys are all over it.
So thank you guys. We seriously can't thank you enough.
Thank you.
Quote to take us out.
Sorry, my bad. I got totally trigger happy there. I was actually thought I was on the comments and I was going to pull up a comment. I'm like, boom, and I click it. I'm like, no, don't click it. So stop it. But then I clicked it again and I clicked it again. So I apologize. I'm sorry, DJ.
That's okay. Were you going to put a Preet's comment? Because
I was going to, but I was on the total wrong page. And then I started. So
funny.
Preet says, good morning. Happy wife, happy life.
Isn't that the truth?
Get them flower orders in.
Jim Burgesson. This is a quote from him. Data will talk to you if you're willing to listen.
I like it.
See? So, Dean, well, that was probably a pretty safe one, DJ. That was a safe one because you knew we were talking about data.
But we're picking it apart, and the way Dean's picking it apart, you have to really...
Yes,
context.
Yes, so I'll do that. So, Dean, we've got DJ every day, sometimes the night before. He picks a quote for the show, and it is insane how bang on he is. The show takes all these remarkable turns and gets off the highway, then gets back on, then gets on the Autobahn and goes a million miles an hour, and then at the end, it somehow comes back to his exact quote. So
it does,
and that's why I think
I'll tell you the other one I was battling with just because we're still talking about it. Torture the data, and it will confess to anything.
That's a good one.
All right.
Oh, they're both really good, DJ.
Rip apart. Figure it out.
Yeah. Well, you have to. You have to.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody. Oh, we got another comment here quickly before we leave. What do we got? Jeff says, thanks, everyone. Have a great day. Have a great day. Jeff.
Thank you, everybody.
And LOL from Preet.
Let's get at it.
Take care.
Yep.
See you tomorrow.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Welcome to the HPLS podcast. Live, relevant, and high performance information.